Bible about people with secret lives, okay? Anybody here know who David was? Not for me here, nobody wants to be like him. Everybody else. Very good. The man who fought Goliath, good job. Sling. If I had something, I'd give it to you, but I don't. So, no, $10 is too much. So David, okay? David becomes the king, okay? So now he's running the armies. I mean, know that kings are pretty powerful. They can run the armies. Alright. So, David's running the army, right? And David, one day, sees this girl, okay, off in the distance. And this girl is very good looking, okay? So David eventually ends up hooking up with this girl, okay? And they end up doing things that they shouldn't be doing. And she ends up getting pregnant, okay? Now, hold on. Lie down or you're gone, okay? So, here's the thing. This little dilemma here. The woman is married.
Oh no.
David's the king, obviously. David has a few options he can play out. The guy who she's married to is actually a soldier in David's army. So David eventually sends to have the guy come and he talks to him about it. He tries to get him drunk because he wants him to have sex with his wife so she can become pregnant by her own husband, right? And cover his back, basically. And so he gets the guy drunk. The guy was still sober enough that he would not have sex with his wife. Now, David being upset with this, he ends up putting this guy on the front line. So, the guy would be killed, right? And he has the army go, and he calls up for the general, and he tells the general, listen, when he gets on the front line, you pull everybody back except for him, and you make him go. So, being very powerful, David did that. And then later on in the story, somebody confronts David about his secrets, his lies, and his, deceitfulness, and he ends up kind of basically understanding how much fun, basically, okay? So then later on in the Bible, who here has heard of Jesus? Very good. That's good. If you guys didn't raise your hand, you're probably sleeping. So Jesus, who knows what Jesus did? Jesus died on the cross. And we just celebrated what? Very good, right. We just celebrated what this past week? Easter, okay. So in Easter, Jesus died on the cross, okay? Before Easter, Jesus died on the cross, and then 3 days later, he rose from the dead. Okay? Which is why we celebrate Easter, because he saved us by dying on the cross, and then he rose again, okay? I'll answer that later. So, Jesus, being who he was, who was Jesus? He is God's Son. So, God sends his Son into the world, okay, to die for our sins. But in this whole thing, there's another secret life that's being lived. And that's with one of the disciples. Jesus had 12 disciples that followed him. Wherever he went, preached for him when he couldn't speak, or when he sent them to speak, they preached. And there was just one disciple who lived a secret life. And I'm going to explain a little bit of that to you right now. And you can, if you guys want to look for this later, you can find it in Matthew 26. But basically, Jesus is he knows that he's just a few days away from being killed. Okay? And one of his 12 disciples is living a secret life. He actually goes and gets paid, I think it was 30 pieces of silver. 30 pieces of silver, just by memory. 30 pieces of silver. And for 30 pieces of silver, he will lead the soldiers to Jesus so they can capture him and eventually kill him and hang him on the cross. So for 30 pieces of silver, okay, that's like, silver is decent money, but 30 pieces of silver, what would that amount to? That would be, okay, just say 30 dimes. That's only, what, $3? $3, which is pennies, really. Not a dime. So you guys get it. So, Judas is the disciple's name. He goes and he sells Jesus basically to the soldiers for 30 pieces of silver, which is nothing, absolutely nothing. And they end up going and grabbing Jesus. Obviously, they arrest him, and Judas is the man living the secret life. He follows this guy around for years. And then he sells him to the soldiers for 30 pieces of silver. And he was living the biggest secret life. But what Easter is, it kind of goes along with Judas' story, because Judas is the one that sold Jesus. And Jesus, eventually, after being captured and brought to trial and blah, 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 he ended up dying for us on the cross. And you guys have never gotten into that at all, into Jesus dying on the cross. He was beaten, he was tied, he had a crown of thorns put on his head, and they pushed it down so it was digging right into his head. You guys ever got hit by a thorn? Doesn't that hurt? I cried. I got hit by a thorn today, and it dug right into my finger, and it started bleeding. What? Yeah, it was. Anyway, so the thorns were on his head. There was a crown of thorns, okay? So he's got this crown of thorns on his head. And basically it's like, who's got a headband? I saw somebody with a headband. Oh, Ken has a headband. Ken's wearing a headband. It's just like a headband. It goes on his head, okay? They call it the crown of thorns. And then he's got that on his head, plus they make him carry the big cross, okay? So he's got the crown of thorns on his head. He's been beaten with what they call a cat o' nine tails. It's got glass sticking out of it, okay? It's got glass with leather straps, and it just goes right down his back. So he's walking like this, okay? He's walking down the street with blood gushing down his back. He's got blood gushing down his face because he's got that crown on. Does it help to carry the crown? Yeah. And then he stumbles because he's just so weak. And all of a sudden he stumbles, and a guy in the crowd grabs the cross for him. I just went So anyway, Jesus eventually makes it to Mount Calvary, and they have two prisoners next to Jesus, okay? Anybody know their names? We call them Jethro and Jimmy, okay? Barabbas and Jimmy. Anyway, Jethro and Jimmy are going to be hung on the cross right next to Jesus. So Jesus in the middle, and they got these two robbers on either side. And Jesus tells the one robber that he can accept his gift of salvation, guys. And accepting that gift of salvation, instead of this guy being a robber and sinning and going to hell, he ends up going to heaven with Jesus. Okay? So right now, I want every head bowed, every eye closed.